Welcome back to What Makes a Bad Airsoft Field Part 2. For this video, we're going to talk about specifically location. Where do you want your field to be? Realistically, we're really talking about indoor versus outdoor fields and kind of the advantages and disadvantages, or maybe advantages, disadvantages aren't accurate. Maybe strengths and weaknesses might be more accurate words. Really, when we're talking about outdoor versus indoor field, really talking about the biggest determination as to whether or not you're going to have a weekend only field or something like a 7-day or a 5-day a week field. But obviously, the more days of the week a field is open, theoretically, the more money they should be bringing into the business. That's at least the theory. And if you kind of look through the community, most of the very successful 7 or 5-day a week fields are indoor. Generally, an outdoor field is kind of in the middle of nowhere. The problem with that is with a field being out in the middle of nowhere, usually means it's a good drive. It's 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour. You have to road trip to the field. Because of that, it's really hard to maintain a business that's open beyond weekends if there's like a 40-minute or more commute involved in it. So it's not really feasible to have that field open every day of the week, or at least a whole lot of weekdays. Weekends, okay, that's kind of easy. Most businesses expect weekends to be their highest grossing days. Weekdays is where you really want to try and make some money. So if I'm just getting off work, or if I'm getting done with school or with class or whatever, and it's a Tuesday or it's a Wednesday or it's a Monday, mid-evening, late evening, it's 4, 3, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever, and I just kind of want to get a couple games in. Maybe I don't want to go all day. Maybe I just want to go for an hour. 20-minute drive might not be that crazy. 40 minutes could be a push. An hour? It's probably not going to happen. Unless you found a way to make something so unique, and unless you've created such a demand for what you have at your field, people are willing to come from miles around. Generally, you don't see that in airsoft. You don't really see that in an outdoor field. Now, let me also say that I personally make a distinction between what I will call an outdoor field and what I will call an outside field. Outdoor field is usually this giant plot of land that might have some hills, or a thick wooded area, or a creek bed, or it has topography, versus an outside field, which is what I would call my field, the Airsoft Ministry. It's more of an outside field, meaning you could take the layout, the map, as it is right now, throw it in a big warehouse. You're not really changing anything. It's not really going to be that significant. Versus if I'm on a big piece of land that is acres and acres large, and I have to go through a creek bed, I have to go up a hill, I have to navigate through some giant hiking trail. There's a hike involved in an outdoor field generally, because there's just so much land space. So for me, there is a difference between an outdoor field and an outside field. In either case, in an outdoor field, you're really at the mercy of the weather. If you look at the weather that we had in Roseville, California on the 22nd of January of 2020, dude, it was pouring out. It was pouring rain. It was super cold. We only had 60-ish kids, if that. I think we had about 60-something kids. But if you look at, say, a couple Sundays ago, or 12 January 2020, it was such a beautiful, it was almost like a spring day in Northern California. It was like picturesque. It was incredible outside. The weather was great. It was super sunny. We really wasn't a cloud in the sky. We had 200 kids. 200. It's a lot. But if you run or manage an outdoor field, weather has a direct correlation with how successful that day will be. Also, there are some fields that if the weather gets to be in a certain way, that field's going to close because the conditions just aren't safe or aren't reasonable for kids to just show up. If you look at UCAs in Galt, California, because of the topography of the area, because of where that field is and where it lies, if it's a strong rainy day, or if it's been raining hard for a couple days, almost I think it's about 2/3 of that field will significantly flood, and they'll tell, like, hey, we're shut down, we're flooded out, we're not going to be open. That sucks. That's horrible from a business standpoint, because that's a weekend you're not gaining money. Bills keep coming in, money doesn't always. So that's a problem. Kind of one of the, I think, the strongest disadvantages of an outdoor field or an outside field, I'm just going to keep saying outdoor, is kind of the lack of an infrastructure. Meaning, because most outdoor fields are kind of so far off the beaten path, you don't have like plumbing. So you're not always going to have like a hard bathroom area. It's why you usually see porta potties or construction toilets. You don't have power. You usually don't have like big buildings or structures or stores or like retail stores or anything like that, because it's just a giant piece of land. So they'll put up some temporary structures, or maybe they'll create a small like office area or an admin area, or maybe they have a couple like storage containers they've converted into some offices. But you don't have like a big storefront or a huge staging area that's climate controlled and you can't charge your phone or your battery. What you bring is what you have, and when you run out of those resources, that's it. If your battery runs out and you can't get another one, you're done. That's it. That's it for the day, because you don't have a means to charge it. If you didn't bring, a solar charger, whatever craziness it's, whatever you kids have these days, you could take a regular piece of land, just a big plot of land. You could make buildings. You could construct a 2-story building. You could make all these other things. You could have, power lines extended or runoff generators. But usually fields aren't going to do that, because there's no direct correlation that says that if I do these things, I'll see a significant increase in revenue. So if I have a giant empty space of land out in the middle of nowhere, and I run a bunch of generators, which cost me, a couple hundred, maybe $1,000 on a weekend to run, I'm not going to see those returns. I'm not going to see a 30, 40, 50% increase in players coming to my field over 3 months. It's really not going to affect business. It'll make the experience better, but for the most part, players, we know as airsofters, players will go to what has reputations for being toxic fields just to play. Kids just want to play airsoft. They don't care about power. They don't care about buildings. There are so many things that kids don't care about. They just want to play. Field owners know this, and they go, okay, we just got to skate by with a bare minimum so we can keep generating a profit. The advantage that an outdoor field will have over an indoor field is the weather, is the experience. Some dudes love to get their buddies together, ruck up and kit up and all this stuff, and go a mile up a hill across a creek bed in the pouring rain, 20 miles uphill barefoot naked in the snow. There is a group of players that absolutely love going through that struggle with their friends. It's cold out, and their feet are wet, and there's a hole in their parka, and blah blah blah. There is a group of players that absolutely love that. Field owners know that, and they've created an experience for that group of players. So there is that aspect of it. And because an outdoor field is outdoors, because it has natural topography, it has hills, it has creeks and bodies of water and all that, there's more of there's a different experience you get between an indoor and an outdoor field, that you can't put a creek in a warehouse. You can't put a big tree line in a warehouse. It's not how this works. You don't have the space for it. You don't have the resources to do that. If you tried it, it would probably not end very well, because it's not natural to that environment. So for a lot of people, they like the outdoor fields because they just want to be outdoors. They don't like indoor fields because they feel like, I can just be indoors and play video games whenever I want. I want to actually be outside and do this. Indoor fields can be tricky, because in order for an indoor field to be really successful, it has to be within city limits. It has to be close to people. So the general appeal of an indoor field is how easy it is to get to it. So if I'm getting off work and I want to go get a game in, I only have to go 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe, if I have my gear with me. Or I could just go home, grab my gear, and drive to the field, and however far of a distance that is. 20-30 minutes might not be that bad. If I just want to go play for an hour, 2 hours, plus usually during the weekdays, it's cheaper. It's a cheaper admission or a cheaper field fee than on weekends. I'll go pay, $5, $10, $15, instead of paying 20, 25, or 30 bucks, just go play for a couple hours. It's going to be a different group of players. It's probably not going to be as many newer kids. There's not going to be as many kids. Not going to be as many rentals. Usually during the weekdays, it's more of like the more experienced players, because they have the gear, they have the resources, and they want to play with more experienced players, and more experienced players generally go to the weekday games, because those weekday games usually have a specific theme to them. They might have a speed night, or a milsim night, or a pistol night, or a low light night. It's not just rental kids in hoodies running around everywhere. I'm sure those kids are still there during a Wednesday game, but compared to a weekend play, it's you're not going to see that many kids there. Realistically, for just the field, just the playable field, you would want at least about 20. I could get away with 25,000 square feet of play space. That's about the minimum I would want to do. Now, depending on where you live, depending on what the real estate property is, depending on the lease, a 25,000 square foot warehouse in some areas might only cost you $5,000 a month. It might also cost you $20,000 a month, depending on the area you're in. Let's say I have a 25,000 square foot warehouse in maybe an industrial area, or a warehouse area, or kind of in a port area, but in an area that normal average customers and people don't go to. Because I don't have as much visibility or traffic, yeah, they'll probably charge me less rent. Versus if I have that same warehouse across the street from a mall, from a Walmart, from a Target, from a, do they still have Piggly Wigglies? From a Piggly Wiggly, or on anywhere by a major intersection, by a major street that has access to freeways, any location where people are generally coming and going constantly, or that's a high trafficked area, I'm going to pay more in lease for that. So maybe what would cost me $5,000 down by the port, kind of in the industrial middle of nowhere, that same area might now cost me $25,000, because it's worth more because of the amount of traffic that goes through there. So it's a cost issue. Also, where you put that warehouse in the city is going to matter. So if I have, let's say there's a shopping area in a lower income area versus a shopping area in a higher income area where everyone's driving Mercedes and Land Rovers and all the cars are new, that higher income area space is going to cost me a lot more money, because those people have more money, generally speaking, for a median income. Versus if I have more of like if I'm in a lower income area where it's used cars, like everyone's got hoopties and 93 Civics and all this other stuff, because in lower income areas people are statistically not spending as much money on luxury items, which is what Airsoft is, I have a better chance to make more money in higher income areas where those parents have no problems dropping $200-300 on a kid who's getting into a hobby for the first time. They have that money to spend. Usually with an indoor area, you can also have an easier or a better retail presence. So you're not just making money off of rentals and field fees, you're also able to sell guns, you can sell gear, whatever, any product you want, any product or service you want, you can sell that stuff. If you look at the Tax City business model and how Tax City makes money, I'm telling you right now, if you have an indoor field and you want to make money, Tax City is the field you want to look at. The retail space, they have different markets of players coming there. That's the way you want to do it. Sonny's making money I'm not going to say hand over fist and make it seem like he's the Bill Gates of Airsoft, but you can't tell me Tax City doesn't make a lot of money. Is there an argument that Tax City is just a pasture for kids and noobs and blah, 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 blah? Sure, you can make that argument that the hardest of the hardest core players are not going to Tax City. But I'm talking about money, dollar signs, paying your rent, paying the car payments, paying for the kids to go to school, paying your employees. I'm talking about making money. A lot of guys don't like that, but if you don't like that, why are you still watching these videos? Just go away. With an indoor field, it can be easier to change your layout more frequently, depending on what kind of buildings or structures you have, or prop buildings or little barricades. Depending on kind of how you set them up, you can sort of push buildings around a little bit easier, or you get a pallet jack, or you just forklift some buildings around, versus most buildings or structures on an outdoor field are, I'm not going to say they're permanent because it's a legal term, it incorporates business code, blah blah blah, but they're more permanent and heavier, and generally an outdoor field's layout usually doesn't change because they just throw a bunch of stuff on there and let it go. On an indoor field, you have a little bit more wiggle space with what you can move building. Look at Project N1. All they do is just move stuff around. It's like a cool puzzle, and they can just keep shifting everything around. It's really innovative to watch how often they will change their layout. So look at Project N1 for how easy it can be to constantly change up your map. Now, when we're changing up the map, the play map, what we're really talking about is giving your customers new experiences within the same space. Does that make sense? Indoor fields can also be a little bit easier to run tournaments because you're not subject to the weather. So if I want to run a tournament, but it's pouring down rain out of nowhere and no one forecasted that weather is either going to shy players away the day of registration, or I might just have to cancel that event altogether, and that stinks. If I was starting my own field, it would be an indoor field of at least 25, ideally about 30 to 40,000 square feet. I would have 2 maps on the field. However you kind of want to incorporate that is kind of subjective how you want to do that, but it would be, I would want a space close to roads. The closer I can get to people, the better, because people have money, and I, as a business owner, want money.
Caber, who the f*** are you, nerd?